Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're back in the studio with our latest webinar as part of Ecommerce World Review. And in this webinar, we're focusing on our rather lovely European top 1000 retailers. It's an enormous report. We do this every year, so I'm not going to spend too much time on reading out the report itself. Rather, I'm joined in the studio by Astrid, and we're going to pick out some of the themes that we think are useful. And also that have applied to us. And I should say that if you're on this webinar, it's probably because you've downloaded the report. But if you've come to the webinar first, fear not, you will get by email a link to download the report. Of course, if you're watching this at some point in the future, hello future, we won't be sending you that, but you can get the report on our website at internetretailing.net, and it is, of course, free of charge to download. But look, I've said hello to Astrid and only shown her photo, so let's now bring Astrid online and say hello. Astrid, welcome. Do tell everybody who you are and also a bit about Landmark.
Hello, hello everybody. I'm Astrid Van Reempts. I'm actually working at Landmark Global. I'm now already 10 years and a half in Landmark Global. And so who is Landmark Global, or what are we doing? So we're a logistical provider. We're a global brand, so we work in the whole world. We have a lot of offices in America, in the US, Canada, Australia, in Europe, in the UK, and in Asia. And so actually what we do is we see ourselves as a cross-border expert. So we actually facilitate retailers to go online and to facilitate your growth. For those online who are following this webinar, so if you're a logistical player, we can assist in that area. But if you're a retailer, an e-tailer, shipping goods online, having a website and willing to sell, we can support you in solutions for international shipping, so worldwide to every destination you want. So we have 220 destinations, so everywhere we can reach. We have also customs solutions, so we're really specialized in customs, and we can facilitate you with customs expertise. Of course, returns as well. And because we're part of the bpost group, so the Belgian Post, we also still have the mail solutions, international mail, which is of course declining, and we're here to talk about e-commerce, but that's also one part of our whole portfolio. And with the group, we can also support on fulfillment solutions to help you fulfill your orders as well for your shop, etc.
Wow, so that's a pretty comprehensive offer. And Astrid, just tell us, generally speaking, we talk a lot in other webinars and reports about cross-border trade in particular, and we'll touch later on the growth, for example, in marketplaces in Europe. So there seems to be a lot more activity. From your experience, are you seeing the level of cross-border trading increasing more than you thought, less than you thought? Just draw us a picture of how active the trading across borders and across regions is at the moment.
Yeah, e-commerce is, of course, a very hot topic, and I think we have been in very turbulent situations lately, so it hasn't been easy, I would say, in cross-border. It's a very interesting moment with all the new legislation, with Brexit, with everything, which is the abolishment of the low-value consignment relief, the pandemic. But we really see that a lot of these things have also helped in markets to be more buying online, has been stimulating. So we really see growth. Also still in our regions where we're active in the US, in Asia, and in Europe and in the UK, we really see growth. And for us, also Eastern Europe is a newer market where we're also really focusing on to see how that can further evolve. And also there, we still see a huge growth pattern going forward. And so it's a really nice evolution, I would say. There's also some new markets popping up where, of course, first last mile delivery network needed to be put in place, like, for example, Southern East Asia. Latin America. So there's new hot markets which are popping up. They will not be hot for next year, but going forward, we see also there that there's a huge growth. And certainly cross-border, the word says itself, you're crossing a border. Within Europe, of course, that's very, still within intra-Europe, I would say, and you're crossing borders, but from a customs perspective, it's easier. But if you go with the Brexit, UK to Europe has been a challenge, of course, and only a few of the really persistent and flexible carriers have made it to making a good solution. But you see that the trade is still ongoing, and it's, I think, going forward, a very interesting market, and we see that still it will evolve, and we need, you see consumers willing to buy everywhere at each moment, and we need to, of course, provide these solutions to these end consumers and to make sure that they can shop wherever they want at whatever moment, whatever product.
Great. Well, look, you've apart from giving us an extra webinar on cross-border, so extra value for money there, you've brought us on nicely to our top is enormous. So as I'm not going to go over that, but I will give a quick overview. I'm going to mention very much in passing the growth of channels. But again, you've mentioned, Astrid, this notion of the customer wanting to buy everything everywhere all the time and getting it to wherever they want. So we see this very much across the board with the top 1000. So we're going to look a little bit about some of the changes in delivery and how delivery is part now of business strategy, platform strategy. And then we can't pass by without looking at sustainability and how that's being shown. So I've put on the right there the ranking. So in case it isn't in your mind, we have Albert Heijn, Amazon, Argos, Carrefour, Halfords, and Samsung as the retailers and brands who really stood out this year. And if you look at the leading ones, so there's a statistical gap in terms of performance across the board here, but still exemplary, then we can see that this level of continental tier one performance tends to be with those retailers who have a broad category offering and a higher price point where possible, or they're like a supermarket that's embedded into your life with multiple visits, but also ones that have really blended the online and offline channels. And if we look at the summary page in the report, we talk there about the index. So we measure over 300 metrics, billions of data points. And if you add those up, a little bit like a total score, if you like, then you can see from the center overall index change that year in, year out, the capability level of the retailers has been increasing. And so what we can see is that in this market with this level of capability, it's not enough to simply be as good as last year or a little bit better. The whole market is expanding in terms of capabilities so much. So if you're simply getting better, then other people are getting more betterer than you, more fasterer. So it's kind of like an expanding universe approach. What we're also seeing, if you look at the bottom left chart, this gives you the average index value by ranking. So what we can see is that the elite group have a 0.39. So this is a 0 to 1 scale, whereas the people at the bottom of the top 1000 are on 0.26. So we're talking about significant levels of capability. And interestingly, on the top right, where you can see the average performance by sector, we see the sectors who are really leading is the fashion sector. And I think this is a combination of incredibly demanding customers, generally a larger number of stores, multiple items in the basket, a complex structured SKU, rather than just a simple, here's a tin of beans. It can be a size, style, color combination. of course, returns, but also an ever-changing fashion schedule. So I think the fashion retailers have been honed, if you like, in the fire of high performance. And then towards the top of the end of the scale, we have the supermarkets and the DIY and homeware who are doing similar things, high volume, high SKU counts, but also have then the difficulty of either an enormous load, for example, a weekly family shop, or maybe a sofa, which is obviously something you don't just put into an envelope. So overall, the picture is of performance increasing year in, year out.
And maybe just if I can,
Please.
that's also something which we see with our clients in Europe and in the UK specifically, that's really in the fashion sector and just overall in all these companies, that the level has really from a performance perspective increased. And of course, as a carrier or as a logistical provider, it's important to be totally on top and to be aligned and to know how to be in advance of that curve and to be able to still support these companies. But because they're really growing in that area and the expertise level is really profound, I would say.
Excellent. That's a really good point. Now, speaking of profound changes, one of the changes that took me by surprise is the growth of marketplaces. So a couple of years ago, we were doing our report, and I was astounded that marketplaces were 39% of all traffic. And then I was more astounded when it got to mid-50s. And I thought, surely this is going to settle down at around 2/3 marketplaces. But if you look at the top part of the highlighted bit of the Sankey chart, then what we can see is that in our ranking, when you look at the largest 100 companies, 62% of them either are a marketplace or have incorporated marketplace technologies into their offering as part of range extension, secondhand, added vendors, and so on. So that's an extraordinary change. But what's even more, I think, shocking is that when you look at the web traffic of European consumers to that top 100, then we see that 85% of the web traffic is going to sites that are either marketplaces or have marketplace capabilities as part of them. So I'm not going to go into it too much now because quite simply we have a marketplaces report, but I'm just going to leave that floating as a major change in Europe, which again, for our listeners in France, this is sort of a move, a closing of the circle, because some of the earliest adopters of commerce in France were marketplaces, department stores, and grocers. And so, in a way, the fact we're all marketplacing up is a continuation of that approach. So, do have a look at our marketplaces report because there's some very interesting stuff in there. I do want to give a shout out in passing to IKEA under the title of Reimagining Retail because of the major shifts they're undertaking. So their approach is that you can buy anything every way. So it's anything, every way, however you like. And remember, IKEA was not just a pioneer, but a real expert in big box offline only retail. They were very late to e-com for good reasons. The product size, the fact they made more money when you went to a big blue shed and spent your add-ons, upsells, cross-sell money there. But over COVID, they did some incredibly good stuff. And Astrid, I'm not sure whether you went to an IKEA over the COVID period, but in the UK, they refashioned their car parks as a sort of cross between an aircraft carrier flight deck and an incubation room and a click and collect, with an incredibly sophisticated way of shopping online, but then driving up and getting your flat packs brought to you. And over over COVID, obviously, then the majority of their sales were, of course, online. Post-COVID, they've seen the levels change to around 70% globally is now in store, but this varies by region. So, for example, in the UK, it's more like 50-50. And what we're seeing is a lot of experimentation with formats. So you'll see here the very nice glassy small store format. And as Anka Iordanescu, who's their VP of Engineering, said, she was talking about the opening of their Central London Oxford Circus branch. And she said simply, no one's going to come to Oxford Street to buy a sofa. And so bringing these high experience stores where you can click, see, touch, but order online, integrating the platforms is very important. And the other thing I want to shout at is they're taking this innovation even further, building on their sustainability credentials, but also now developing localism. So in a number of cities, you have a program called Atelier 100, which is where local makers and retailers, craftspeople who live within and make within 100 kilometers of the store work as a cohort for a year and get support to build their businesses within a store that is itself made largely of recycled materials. And when I visited their store last year, what was interesting is that all the fittings are recycled from the strip out of the Oxford Street store. So they're actually using bits of another store to create a new store, again, with a lower impact. So I thought it was worth just pulling them out, just to show that retailers who are towards the elite end are not just doing one thing well, they're doing everything well, but also experimenting, changing formats, and generally being more flexible. I mean, Astrid, you obviously know IKEA. Do you think I've been fair to them and in holding them up as an
No,
example?
certainly, because it's interesting to see the model in the UK. It's not the same as in Belgium, so I'm interesting to see when it will be rolled out into Belgium. But that trend that you see with IKEA is actually similar what you also see with other sectors as well and other retailers, which actually where you see that the collection from the shop is gaining actually in market share. Before, everybody was just willing to have home delivery, but now the choice and offering different type of solutions, and certainly that example of IKEA is a really nice one because that shows that very visual how they used the COVID period and the pandemic to reinvent into after the pandemic period, and also that is what we see. So it's not only collect from store, what we also see is ship from store. That more and more shops are also thinking about how doing the fulfillment in the shop, and even going further to also see how can we work on the sustainability and have other options like deliveries in a PUDO point, like in a shop or in a locker, to actually reduce also your CO2 part on that area and to actually work on other options which are not the standard home delivery part. So that's really the trends going forward, which I think will only gain in market share going forward.
Absolutely. Well, let's have a little look at the selling side now. So again, I'm not going to dwell on these too much because there are loads of case studies in the report. But I did want to just point out how retailers are making a massive effort to make it easier for the customer to complete their basket, and more importantly, to help them understand what they're buying. So one of the reasons we've featured Albert Heijn here is the way they've integrated the dietary information, the product's provenance, and extended data about the product into their app. So, for example, whether you're on a diet or you have allergies or you're buying brands based on their purpose and their values, this is so much easier to do thanks to the data that they're surfacing, even in the app, which is relatively small footprint. Another company we wanted to highlight is a small company founded in Scotland, in the north of the UK. And what's interesting about them is they sell very awkward things like guitars, which are very difficult to transport. But also, if you play a guitar, you know you need to try a guitar. And if you don't play the guitar, then how do you buy your first guitar? So a lot of experimentation here about how you can make it easy for the customer to get the guitar, to try it out with then a good returns option. But I'm just looking at this, Astrid, and I'm thinking, is one thing promising to deliver a guitar, but it's a very delicate, large, awkward item. So, how do retailers, what adaptations do they need to make when they're sending things that aren't simply the size of a letterbox or the size of a locker?
I think it's also a new trend. Before, I think 10 years ago, you wouldn't see guitars being shipped. And of course, what's really important in these more sophisticated products and products which are, of course, delicate, that the packaging is correct, and that everything around packaging and the way that if you would treat it by a courier, that it cannot get damaged. And it's the same like some are shipping even bottles of whatever can be inside the bottle. It can be wine or it can be other things. But it's really important that the way that it's packaged and the way that it's being worked on to make sure that it's keeping the form and the size, because you don't want to get that guitar at your doorstep and actually discover that it's broken and then already start on a return process. That's not the right experience.
No.
So it's really important for retailers also to look at the courier. We are not specialized in really special products, I would say. We really go for the main common products. Of course, if the guitars are well in the nicely boxed and good wrapping, then of course each of the carriers can do it. But I think as a retailer, that's really important and key to make sure that it's that there as well.
Good. Well, we do have a packaging report as well. So I'm always interested where people have had incredible packaging experiences. So do drop me a note, research@retailx.net. I would love to hear where you've been wowed by really good packaging, especially for an important or delicate item. Speaking of delicate items and staying with the musical sector, some of the things we've also been seeing is how data is being brought forward to help with product selection. And so in the past, we're quite used now to having people who looked at this bought that, or people who bought this also bought that. But I just want to give a shout out to Toman for not just showing maybe one or two others, but giving you, if you like, a cascade of alternatives with product thumbnails and a percentage and a price. So even as you're looking at a product, you're being informed and sold to, but without pushing. So it's hyper relevant based on browsing and buying behavior. But I thought this one was a nice one for you, Astrid, which is this is from Argos, which is owned by Sainsbury's PLC. And here they're very much using and bringing forward delivery, collection, and return data to be a part of the selling process. So even as you're thinking, do I want to get this product? Your mind is thinking, but can I get it by tomorrow? Is it cheap? Can I return? So all of these factors that would put you off a sale, all being brought to the front end. So a combination of data, if you like, and service level. State of the art or average expectation now?
No, indeed, and that's also something which we see more and more. Right? It's really important that it's brought up in the sales cycle as soon as possible. Also, this data is very important because, of course, the data which you're showing on the product, on the returns, on all the details, the SKU level, it's actually used in the whole process, in the whole value chain, I would say, and more also. Even if you're crossing borders, it becomes even more important because if you need to do customs declarations, etc., so that's useful. But also to avoid that you have returns coming back. So product information, like what are the type of sizes when you're ordering it, can help you to prevent needing to go into the more complicated, the non-happy flow, we call it, for the majority of the time in the logistics. But of course, you want to avoid that as much as possible. And so for us, we see that as a new trend, which is really important, and I think will only gain going forward in the future, because it's really valuable, and it's really, today you still see, or you can be still surprised about examples where companies are not yet looking at it. So take this tip, I would say, to really focus on it, because I think it will really help to sell more and to gain more for the online sales in your shops.
Great. Well, look, even though we've talked a bit about delivery, one of the things I wanted to highlight is that delivery is no longer something that happens by someone else after you've done the hard work of making a sale. We're starting to see some really big shifts by major players and platforms that are really changing the way I think that the dynamics between delivery, selling, and partnerships is going to work. But before I dive into that, did you want to maybe give us your overview on what you've seen in the market and the trends across the top 1000? So in our report, we've looked at how operations and delivery, we're driving access to customers, we're increasing margin, we're helping get market share, all thanks to good delivery. But as you look at the report, what are the thoughts that came to your mind in this sort of delivery, logistics, reverse logistics area?
I think for us, what we see as a big change, because before it's always about speed and about cost. I think that are the basics, and everybody always wants it quicker and at the best price, I would say. But I think what's really key and important for us, and what we also see as going forward, is that clients are really telling us it's about speed, but it's about the reliability of the speed. And so the reliability of the transit times, if you say or you promise it's going to be delivered in 5 days, that you keep your promise and it's 5 days. So it's not one day, 3 days, and the other day, 7 days, but it's actually that you deliver on the promise. So that's really an important one, also in the tracking and all the things which come with it. But on top, the caring or the service wrap on how you guide your client in the whole process. So it's actually from the onboarding and making sure that you're involved in the whole process of the strategy of the delivery, on how the company is willing to deliver the product and actually their promise as a brand in the whole chain.
Yes.
Going forward, of course, into the after sales and making sure that it's a total package. And so that's something which we really see that has been changing. And then I said before already, also the delivery options have changed. So before it was one standard home, now it's a choice, and you need to be able also to do these special products. We get more and more, can you do these sizes and these bigger mattresses type of products as well? So the chain of choice is also very important to allow to have choice for end consumers.
Okay, so I love that. It's promise, service, choice, and you mentioned reliability and cost as part of that. So you've kind of ticked off all of those things. One of the things that we've seen has really excited us, that brings this growth and marketplaces and delivery together, is what we're seeing with TikTok and TikTok Shop in particular. So for someone like me who's older and doesn't spend all of his life on TikTok, when you dive in, it is just quite phenomenal, the pace and the addictive nature, but also the entrepreneurship of TikTok sellers, who are selling via live shopping. They're creating special tutorial videos that are shoppable, or just straightforward product showcases where it's like a grid of thumbnails, just like a normal website. And we see these incredible timed events as well. Again, for the old people, it's like QVC on your mobile, but mixed with social media aspects. So I think what we've got is we have the level of engagement, entertainment, infotainment, shopping, influencing, all coming together with social. As Astrid, you were saying, people like Amazon, especially with Amazon Prime, have trained us for the last 15 years what to expect from delivery. So it's fascinating now to see that TikTok is launching its own logistics service, which is launched in the UK and will be rolling out. So again, what they're saying is, if you want to advertise, we have TikTok Business and Ads. If you want to sell to your audience, there's TikTok Shop. If you want to link your e-commerce store, so that this is an add-on channel, feel free. We integrated, and now it's saying we'll fulfill as well. So the integration between inspiration, engagement, fulfillment has now really closed. But just when we're thinking, oh, they've stolen the march, we have Amazon that have launched their multi-channel fulfillment, which, and I'm simplifying here, so please don't sue me, but allows retailers and brands to have Prime-like delivery service, even though they're not selling on Amazon. And the prices are quite interesting as well. And then at the same time, you have Shopify, which seems to be the platform of choice for so many small and growing retailers, but not just the small ones, of course. They are now going back into store with point of sale, but also linking with direct integrations to TikTok. And so they can now do, along with their tie-up with Amazon, fulfillment for both of them as well. So this complicated, interconnected world where giants are dancing with each other, and these tier one elite services coming together. The customer, I think, Bobby, is going to be, Astrid is going to be the winner, but that's going to be difficult for everybody else, because when these guys are offering that sort of AAA gold-plated, click of your thumb service, it really does put pressure on everyone else to partner or meet the same standards.
Yeah, it's a very interesting world because more and more, before we used to be all in our boxes. You were a carrier and we were just doing the delivery. You were a platform, you were just having a marketplace. You were an e-tailer having a shop online. But now you see on all of these parts of the value chain in logistics, you see everybody's trying to get a piece of the cake, I would call it, and actually diversifying and offering the end-to-end value chain. And of course, it's very challenging to then beat up to the big boys of the e-commerce playground. And of course, the competition, certainly in the UK, is very harsh. So everybody is willing to play in the same game. And so it's indeed interesting. But I think for the consumer, it's of course having even more choice and actually having more suppliers and offerings available. Probably of these new value chain models will get, I think, new business models as well, like the examples that Ian just showed. But I think going forward, it will even go into even more evolved into each other, I think, because now it's sometimes difficult to know which partner is in which box and what are they doing. And sometimes even the next day, they already have something new on the marketplace or on the shop. So that's going to be an interesting trend to follow, and should be only better for the end consumers.
Good, so long as we can keep it simple, seamless, quick, reliable, cheap, etc. So consumers tend to be even more demanding than we are. Let's just finish off on sustainability, and it's more than a buzzword. It is something that so many retailers are simultaneously dealing with more and more legislation and requirements, but at the same time, they are pushing harder as well, because this is a matter of purpose and vision. But I think it was interesting. This comes from our recently released sustainability report. So do watch out for a webinar on that this week, in fact. What's interesting is that we've listed the number of retailers in the top 1,000 who show on their website their own sustainability goals, their progress to those goals. They have an example of a recent sustainability report within the last 12 months and a public list of suppliers, which is something that I hadn't seen until this year, but is I can see it's accelerating already. But interestingly, the largest number there is 11%. So the skeptics amongst us will say, oh, it's only 11%. And everyone else will think, well, it's gone from nothing to 11%. So better hurry up and get on board quickly. So, the key thing is to be honest and open about the steps you're taking. And I think we went through a greenwashing phase where people claimed too much. Then there was a little bit of what's called green hushing, where we thought, look, we're not perfect. We shouldn't say anything. It's better to just be quiet. Now I think it's settling down to be, show the journey, show the progress, and be open to the conversation. Because what we see increasingly, and this data comes from our European Consumer Observatory, is we really are seeing that the lead on all of this in terms of, would I rent rather than buy? Am I interested in returning it for resale? Do I expect the company to send me recyclable packaging for returns? All of these things, if you look at the big black lines, those are the people who say, never, 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 I don't want to do it. And so we can see that throughout, it's somewhere between 80% of people who don't want to play and 50%. But if you look at the shape of the blue bars, what you can see is that it is the boomers and the silent generation, so aged 78 later, have the big black bars. But there's more and more customers in the Gen X, Gen Z, millennial cohorts who are saying time and again that these are more and more important to them. So are they more than half? No. Is it a case that they will definitely do what they say? No. But in a market where we're looking at marginal gains, where a 1% improvement is worth having, it's sort of a bit weird to be saying to the most active, higher spending category that you're not listening to them. And not just listening, but reflecting. So I mentioned transparency earlier on. And for me, one of the things that is interesting is how data is being brought forward to the website. So Astrid, we mentioned earlier on about Argos bringing delivery data forward, whereas this retailer, Cézanne, is an exemplar in terms of how they integrate some quite complicated sourcing data with assurance, with material standards, etc., and integrate that into the body of the product description page, but without overloading it. So a very impressive approach then, something we're seeing more and more. So whether the data is around delivery, availability, product options, the storytelling, the social aspects, or sustainability, more and more is coming to the front to be right in the customer's face.
Indeed. And that's also what we see with shops willing to actually then promote also, for example, the deliveries in a shop and actually put how much CO2 it's less producing, while you need to not have a home delivery compared to getting it in a Pudo shop, for example. So that are examples that we're also seeing, and it completely changed. Before, you were never getting these questions as a carrier or a logistical provider, and these days, depending, of course, also on the shop and the e-tailer, it's one of the main topics. And of course, we as a carrier also find it really important. You need to evolve in that trend. And as bpost Group, it's one of our main ambitions to really work on that part as well together to make sure that it's helping. But on the shop level, you can really see that we see those choices, these offerings being put forward. And we as a logistical provider need to make sure we're, of course, not having a delivery network in all countries, but we then need to make sure that we're partnering with companies which have those. It's rare these days, I would say, to have a fully green delivery option being brought up, but it's indeed the happy fews which are really pushing those forward. It's not yet there for everywhere, but certainly for the future. And this data on where it's coming from, etc., it's really important to, as you saw it in the example, to show that on the front page. And consumers are really requesting that.
Yes.
That they're really looking for that. They're really willing to read that and to compare with other shops and e-tailers.
And again, it's not even a case that we can prove that it absolutely always adds an uplift.
Yeah.
But I think it's becoming obvious that if it's not there, it just adds an extra question in the customer's mind, where they doubt you a little bit. And so the absence of it exactly is more. So we have done quite a lot today. So thank you, Astrid, for joining me to just pick some things out of this enormous report. So within it, we've not only got the company rankings, the market overview, but we have information from our sustainability research, our European Consumer Observatory, direct consumer research, case studies, etc., and of course, we've touched on sustainability. So it all comes together in the performance of the top 1000. Do download the report. I'll just remind you where it is again. But as I said, if you're listening to this live, then of course we will mail you the direct download link. Any thoughts, questions, ideas of what you want us to look at next, exemplars we may have missed you'd like us to dive into, our ears are always open. research@retailx.net will get through to us. But for now, our time is up. So it's thank you from me, and a thank you in particular to Astrid for joining us. That's the end of our webinar. Thank you very much.